Before we get into this video, let me come right off the bat and state it clearly. If you believe that Cressida Cowper is the devil's incarnate who deserves everything that happened to her and more, or you think that Archibald Featherington is worse than the stain beneath his family's shoes and should have been treated as such, or you think Nigel Burbrook is the worst of them all and deserves to have a mountain fall on his horrible head, well, you know what? Nigel deserved everything he got. But Cressida and Archibald, though, I think that requires a bit more nuance, which is why we have this video. So, yeah. Here is me talking about how the punishment doesn't fit the crime in Bridgerton, and why I think it's because the show and its rules are not a big fan of rebellious thought. Now, before I go deeper into things, hello, I'm Noria, and I like to talk about characters, themes, and stories across various mediums, movies, TV shows, books, anime, and video games. If that sounds like your jam, do check out some of my other videos, and if you like what you see, consider hitting the subscribe button. Also, if my voice sounds foggy or groggy in some parts, it's because I seem to be coming down with a cold and the cup of tea. Now, if the immediate thought that popped into your head is, girl, why are you making a video when you should be in bed resting and hydrating? Well, it's because I've had this thought stuck in my head for weeks, running around in circles. And let me tell you, the absolutely worst thing to do when you have a cold and cannot sleep, even though you need sleep, is to have a video idea in your head that refuses to let you sleep. So, by watching this video, which I hope sounds coherent in a way, you all are helping me clear those thoughts and hopefully get a good night's sleep tonight. So, thank you. And with that out of the way, let's talk about crime and punishment and why I think Bridgerton is harder on some of its characters than others, namely Cressida Cowper and Archibald Featherington. Now, like I stated at the start of this video, we all collectively agree that neither of these characters are bastions of goodness. Now, am I justifying their actions in any way, shape, or form? No, I am not. These are very flawed people who did some pretty shitty things or attempted to anyway, and some of them are way worse than others. I'm not arguing with that, but this video is coming from the perspective that a lot of the characters in the world of Bridgerton are pretty flawed people who make some pretty questionable and sometimes hypocritical choices. And the reason why a lot of them get away with it is by virtue of them being favored, blessed, or more simply put, working within the framework of what the story requires of them. Those who have the audacity to step out of the roles and expectations that the story wants of them, keyword here being audacity. Because yes, I do believe the reason why these characters are punished in such a devastating way, death for Archibald Featherington and exile for Cressida Cowper, is because these two characters who were audacious enough to want something different for themselves, to help them break free of what would be stereotypically expected of them in their situations as a result of their past choices, refuse to let things be. What do I mean by that? Let's start with Cressida Cowper. When we meet her at the start of the show, Cressida is a young woman, like the rest of the young ladies of the ton, excited at the thought of hopefully getting a match suited to her status, and helping her secure her position within their society. And because I keep repeating this whenever I make my Bridgerton videos, I will do that again in this one. Bridgerton is a world set on predicated rules that there are a limited number of young, titled, or aristocratic men. And for the ladies who want to get a good match, they have to do so with the knowledge that unfortunately, they are going to be in competition with each other for that. Acting otherwise is being dishonest about the stakes within which girls like Cressida were working with. Because if we're honest with ourselves, the girls wouldn't be exactly the way they are if they do not think that they have to scrape and fight and push their way to be seen ahead of the others. For example, we see that back in season 1, when it looked like Cressida was going to get her fairy tale ending with the prince, she was gloating, yes, but she wasn't as horrid. She seemed more like she was preening, that she's achieved the height of what she was always meant to accomplish, who she's meant to be. There wasn't a need to bully Penelope or to go out of her way to be horrid to the other girls. It's why she looked almost sad when she told Daphne that Daphne could have had anyone else, but instead went for the prince that had set his eyes on Cressida because Daphne at first hadn't been interested in him. She was aware that in their world, thanks to the privilege Daphne had as the season's diamond, an honor bestowed on her by the queen herself, it meant that all the men would want Daphne and the rest of the girls would have to fight over her leftovers. Now, Daphne initially didn't want the prince, but when scorned by Simon, she turns her charms to Frederick, and Cressida, who because of her prior belief that she had a fairy tale marriage in the bag, had most likely spurned other suitors, was out in the cold, with no man to show for it. She played by the rules their society demanded of her and still failed spectacularly at getting the result she wanted. So is anyone surprised really that she would lash out at Daphne, who to her seemed like she had broken code, acted improperly, and gotten rewarded for it? Her snide remarks to Daphne after the incidents in the Queen's Garden, which, let's be real, was scandalous and would have ruined Daphne if anyone else had discovered it, were justified to Cressida. But what was Daphne's punishment? She was rewarded with marriage to one of the most eligible dukes around, who came around to loving her, and they got to walk away into the sunset. Well, actually, Reggie walked first and then Phoebe, but hey, walk away into the sunset they did, because now that we have closed out the story of the Duke and the Duchess, the expectation is that they are having their happy ending somewhere out of sight. We fast forward to season 2 and Cressida has a second chance at a happy ending. This time around with the new Lord Featherington, who is well-travelled, handsome and charming and seemingly rich, what with his thriving ruby business. Plus, he seems to actually be interested in her, and again, although she looks down on the other young ladies when this happens with the inward glow that she's about to marry a true catch of a man, and yes, she is still rude to Pen, but she isn't mean to her in a way that I interpreted as things seem to be aligning for Cressida. And so she was in a happier mood and less likely to talk bitch to everyone else around her. And then what happens? She loses that shot. The man she had been hoping would be hers is forced into an engagement with Prudence Featherington because he had besmirched her honor and been caught alone with her without any chaperones. A scandalous state of events that once again led to yet another young woman, rather than being punished, be rewarded with the one thing that Cressida wanted: marriage to someone titled and seemingly wealthy. Then we get to the first half of season 3, and the pressure is starting to show the cracks in Cressida's world. She's running out of time, and her parents are growing impatient with her at the fact that she still hasn't found a match. Like the decision is up to the young ladies of the ton, and not that they are left to the whims and caprices of the gentlemen, who are the ones to decide when they want to marry and to whom they want to be married. The added pressure has her turning to Lord Deblin as a consideration. And initially, after she gets over the hurdle of it looking like she has nothing to say, things end up differently, because when she loses track of having to pretend or forcing herself to seem like someone she's not, she and Deblin get along pretty well. Until Penelope, who is also competition for Lord Deblin's affection, shows up. But then Penny turns out has feelings for Colin, and vice versa, and the ride, unchaperoned in her family's carriage, results in some heavy makeout session that ordinarily, ideally, should have been punished by their puritanical society. But again, she is rewarded for it. She becomes engaged to Colin. And I think, as someone who kept getting L's, who was faced with the realization that their world is not only unfair and hypocritical, but it's also one that doesn't reward good behavior, but instead seems to realign itself to serve the interests of those willing to change its rules and step out of line of propriety and decency, at least to Cressida. So what does she do? Simple. When she's stuck with the horror of being married to a man old enough to be her great-grandfather, she rebels, realizes that the only thing that can save her is to have her own money. And how is she going to get said money at a time when women can't even work or own their own property? Easy. She lays claim to the identity of Lady Whistledown, the very face of impropriety, with the hope that not only would the scandal keep her out of reach of her father's clutches, but the Queen's reward would set her up real nicely. And when the real Lady Whistledown challenges her words and reveals her as a fraud, Cressida, by a stroke of luck, discovers that Lady Whistledown was Penelope all along and makes the play for some blackmail. Now, do I approve of any of Cressida's actions? No, I do not. But can I make a guess about why she made them and the thought process that got her to the point where she realized that that was her only option? Yes, I can. And yet, Bridgerton, and when I say Bridgerton, I mean the entity, the collection of societal rules and norms, meet the writer's powers and decisions on where the story should go, reacts by not acknowledging that she attempted to play the game and is like a lot of the other characters who have resisted and tried to make their own way and force their own decisions through, and rewarded these characters for it. Instead, Bridgerton, as a story, chooses to exile her with an aunt who is very vocal about how she hates everything that Cressida stands for and is delighted at the thought of bringing her to heel. Why do the other characters get the chance to have their moment in the sun with the story realigning to get them to their happy ending, and Cressida doesn't? What do they have that Cressida doesn't have? I mean, Beyond the obvious answers that they are the story's leads, and so the story demands that they get to where they should be at, and everything must realign to give them their happy ending, like, sure. But it's simple when you think about it, really. Cressida Cowper has been set into a role that the story demands she fits into. She is the mean girl. And with the mean girl, our expectations, the desire, the thirst of the audience is that she meets her Waterloo, that she gets the punishment she deserves for all the hurt she's inflicted on the other characters. Cressida is the personification of every single mean girl, every bully we've experienced in our lives, and so we project those feelings onto her, hoping that she meets a satisfyingly devastating end that we know our real life bullies wouldn't get to experience, but Cressida would. And so I do think that the writers wrote her story in that way to bring some sort of catharsis to viewers who want her to pay. But this just brings me back to the title of the video. Does her crime deserve that punishment? Does Cressida Cowper deserve what looks like a future where she is abused with an aunt who would force her to lose all that color and spirit, so she ends up as sour and horrid as her aunt is? Like, Cressida is mean, yes, but we see that from the second half of season 3 that the odds were stacked against her from the start. None of us can say we were actually surprised with how she turned out and who she became, considering what her revealed home life looked like. And with what I can see, living with her aunts wouldn't make her any better. That woman has zero joy in her life, and the Cressida we meet in season 3 is someone that looks like, with the right friends, people who actually care and listen to her, and are not merely in competition with her for the attention of the men of the ton. She looks like someone who could have been halfway decent. And we don't get that. Because the story sought to punish her heavily for everything she's done, when in actual fact, she did them all because the rules of their society, and by extension, the story itself, demanded it of her. So how is she to blame for that? Why is she punished so heavily for that, or for deciding that she's going to try her hand at breaking free of the constraints of their society to want something more for herself outside of the mold she was being forced into? Would the writers have taken the same route they did if they were not aiming for the audience's catharsis? I repeat, does Cressida Cowper's punishment fit her crime? Or what about Archibald Featherington? Sure, he's a man with a clear gambling addiction who doesn't know when to stop, or rather, cannot stop, and therefore finds himself on the verge of losing everything whilst having screwed up his daughter's chances of a happy wedding. Like, yes, having a gambling addiction is a problem, but can we honestly say that him playing at rigging the system was not done for the sake of saving himself and his family? Did he deserve to die because he played a bad hand? Because he took a bet with people who responded to his deviousness by not just killing him, but also taking their money back? Which then meant that his family was in an even worse position than they had been at the start. As the head of the household and the baron that he is, Archibald Featherington had a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. His society expected him to care for his family, to provide for his daughters. His inability to do so would affect not just him, but the women under his care. And so he tried, figured that there might be a way for him to make that money back via the same means with which he lost his wealth. Because clearly, Lord Featherington was not the only one gambling. His actual flaw and problem was that he was shit at it. All the other lords were also gambling. He wasn't the only one. He wasn't a lone wolf. What worked for the others was that they had better luck than him. And yet, he was punished for that consistently until he took the biggest gamble and screwed things up so badly that he was punished for it. Actually, it wasn't him that really suffered. His death was over with a quickness. It happened off screen. The people, the ones that had to live with the consequences of his decisions, that actually suffered for his crimes, were his family. Archibald Featherington's punishment was borne by his family. So, did that punishment fit the crime? Were his actions ones that should have carried over through all those people? How is his irresponsibility as a father something that his wife had to spend several years, several seasons trying to fix, and his youngest daughter had to resolve? Was his terrible luck and his horrible parenting skills something that needed such a punishment? Or is it Bridgerton that punishes him for doing something that his peers did as well? All for the sake of a story? Because when you really consider it, just like Cressida, Archibald is also meant to fill the audience with the vindication of, this man played stupid games and won stupid prizes. And yet, I am stuck with the realization that the only people that got any prizes are his family that had to clean up after his ass. So was that punishment truly deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, please. Like I said, this has been keeping me up at night for weeks, and I just had to get it off my chest. If you like this video and what I had to say, do hit the like button. If you didn't, please hit the dislike button. In this case, I think it is fitting for you to decide how you choose to interact with my content. And if you think others should hear what I have to say as well, do consider sharing this video. It does help my channel reach a wider audience, which helps it grow, and is incredibly supportive of my content. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to my Patreons who are so helpful in helping me keep the lights on. Thank you. If you would like to support me on Patreon, the link to do so is in the description bar. I make new videos 3 times a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Whilst you wait for a new video from me, do check out my last Bridgerton video where I explore whether or not we can really categorize Eloise Bridgerton as a bad friend. Until next time, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.